Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Global Taiwan Institute. My name is Russell Shao. I am the Executive Director here at GTI. GTI is a 501c3 think tank dedicated exclusively to Taiwan policy research and related programs. Our mission is to enhance the relationship between the United States and Taiwan with the world by contributing to a more informed discussion through research and analysis. In pursuit of that mission, we undertake several major programs. They include our Global Taiwan Brief, our public seminars, an annual symposium that we host in the fall. We also offer scholarship and fellowship opportunities along with a series of podcasts that we host here at GTI. I'd be remiss if I began today's program without thanking our co-founders, our board of directors, our advisors, as well as the staff and interns here who make all our programs possible. So let's begin. Today's public seminar is a special event. Today marks the 45th anniversary of the enactment of the Taiwan Relations Act, which was passed by Congress in 1979, and which has provided an enduring legal framework and policy guidance for US-Taiwan relations that has lasted for 45 years. This remarkable legislation mandated special American obligations and supported commitments to Taiwan that have helped to preserve peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. Now, to commemorate the 45th anniversary of the TRA, Taiwan's foreign minister, Joseph, just issued the following statement issued on their social media. I think it's fitting to read it in full right here. I quote, 45 years ago today, thanks to strong bipartisan support in the U.S. Congress, the Taiwan Relations Act, or TRA, was signed into law. The TRA has since been the cornerstone of a close, robust, and comprehensive Taiwan-U.S. partnership. 4.5 decades, it has also been the anchor preserving peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. The TRA has not only demonstrated the rock-solid principle and bipartisan U.S. commitment to Taiwan, but also advanced commercial, cultural, and many other forms of exchange between our peoples. The TRA continues to underpin Taiwan's key role as a beacon of democracy, a thriving economy, and a technological powerhouse. Taiwan, together with the United States and other like-minded democracies, will continue to defend freedom and democracy across the globe. So while the TRA is certainly a uniquely designed to protect and promote U.S. interests in Taiwan in the absence of diplomatic relations, it does not operate in a policy vacuum. Throughout its existence, the TRA has been tied to the 1979 normalization agreement between the United States and the People's Republic of China, which is also commemorating its 45th anniversary. The TRA, the 6 assurances, and the 3 communiques, alongside subsequent legislations, review, and executive actions that form the foundation of a relatively stable trilateral relationship between the United States, Taiwan, and the PRC. However, with China unceasingly and aggressively seeking to coerce and threaten Taiwan through both military and political warfare, its unilateral abolition of the International Treaty on Hong Kong provides an ominous sign. The systematic challenge to international order as well, simply pointing out that maintaining the status quo may be increasingly unrealistic long term. Furthermore, the massive military buildup across the Taiwan Strait by the PLA, coupled by the Chinese leadership's continued refusal to renounce the use of force against Taiwan, and the Chinese Communist Party's intensifying gray zone pressure are substantially destabilizing the Taiwan Strait and threatening the peace and security of the Indo-Pacific area and beyond. As Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has stated, and I quote, China is the only country with both the intent to reshape the international order and increasingly the economic, diplomatic, military, and technological power to do it. Beijing's vision would move us away from the universal values that have sustained so much of the world's progress over the past 75 years. So as strategic changes necessitated adjustments in U.S. policy during the Cold War, fundamental changes in the circumstances of the 21st century may warrant, at the very least, an evaluation of whether the TRA is properly calibrated. And so while we are here assembled to celebrate the longevity of the Taiwan Relations Act, I hope that part of our discussion here today will also assess the extent to which existing legal and policy framework can endure. I should also note that today's event should be viewed as complementary to a special issue of the Taiwan Relations Act that GTI just published last week, in which we feature 7 analytical pieces with the TRA and its applicability to the future. I would encourage everyone to read the articles when you have some time. And to help us kick off today's discussion, I am truly honored to be able to introduce our keynote speaker. Congressman Mike Gallagher has represented Wisconsin's 8th district in the U.S. House of Representatives since 2017, and really has been a force of nature and thought leader in Congress on foreign policy issues, especially pertaining to the Indo-Pacific region. Representative Gallagher currently serves as the chairman of the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party, along with co-chair Congressman Roger Krishnan. He's also the chairman of the House Armed Services Subcommittee on Cyber, Information Technology, and Innovation, the Permanent Select Committee on Television. Gallagher served for 7 years on active duty in the United States Marine Corps, including 2 deployments to Iraq. And after Congressman Gallagher's remarks, we'll hear from an equally distinguished group of former senior practitioners who have worked at the highest levels of the U.S. government, directing and implementing policy towards Taiwan across administrations, Democrat and Republican. And I'll save my introductions for them shortly after we play the keynote remarks from Congressman Gallagher. So we thank Congressman Gallagher for those really strong words of support for the U.S.-Taiwan partnership, but also the sobering assessment about the challenges ahead. And so without further ado, I want to turn it over to our expert panel discussion. And truly, as I mentioned earlier, we have an equally distinguished group of real senior practitioners who have worked at the highest levels of the U.S. government, directing and implementing policy towards Taiwan and cross-strait relation, and this spans across Democratic and Republican administration, testifying to the fact that this U.S. policy and U.S.-Taiwan relations remains a strong bipartisan commitment. And let me introduce them briefly in the order that they will be speaking. To my immediate left, we have Ryan Haas, who is the director of the John L. Thornton China Center, and the Chen Fu and Cecilia Yen, co-chair in Taiwan Studies at Brookings. He's also a senior fellow at the Center for Asia Policy Studies. Ryan also served as the director for China, Taiwan, and Mongolia at the National Security Council staff, during which he advised President Barack Obama and senior White House officials on all aspects of U.S. policy towards China, Taiwan, and Mongolia. Next to Ryan, who will be speaking, is David Stilwell, who recently completed a term as Assistant Secretary of State for the Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs. Prior to his appointment as Assistant Secretary, he served in the U.S. Air Force for 35 years, beginning as a Korean linguist, and then rising to the rank of Brigadier General as the Asia Advisor to the Chairman of Joint Chiefs. He served multiple tours in Japan and Korea, as fighter pilot, as well as commander, as well as a defense attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing, among many other senior postings in the U.S. military. Last but not least, we have Josh Carden, who is an adjunct professor of Asian Studies at Georgetown University Walsh School of Foreign Service, as well as a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security. He's also a member of the U.S. Export-Import Bank's Advisory Subcommittee on Strategic Competition with the People's Republic of China. He's also currently a partner at TD International, where he focuses on helping clients navigate complex transaction and operational challenges. Josh has over 20 years of experience in the U.S. federal government in senior policy positions in Washington and overseas. He also served in the National Security Council's East Asia Directorate under 2 different presidential administrations, finishing as Deputy Senior Director for Asia. At details in Pentagon, as well as also the American Institute of Taiwan, the U.S. de facto embassy in Taiwan. So we have really a wealth of experience and knowledge that we have assembled here today. And so with that, I've asked each of our panelists to provide brief opening comments for around 10 minutes. Following each of their all of their comments, we will then have a moderated discussion, followed by audience Q&A. For those of you joining us online, you may engage as well. We want to hear from you. So please send your email questions to contact@globaltaiwan.org, or you can also use the chat function on our YouTube page. Please do include your name and affiliation. Those that do will be prioritized in the order of questioning. So with that, let me turn it over to Ryan.
Thank you, Russell. It's wonderful to be with you all. I appreciate Global Taiwan Institute for being this timely event. And I also want to take a moment to recognize Congressman Gallagher in his service. He's going to be missed. He's played a very important role in galvanizing discussion and debate, and I'm sure he'll continue to lend his voice to the discussion going forward. I am going to attempt to be deliberately brief in my opening comments because I think that a lot of the richness and value of our time together is going to be the conversation that we have. But for the purpose of getting us kicked off, I'm going to put 4 ideas on the table. The first is that the Taiwan Relations Act has been wildly successful. It's worth taking a moment to reflect that in early 1979, Taiwan was under martial law, Taiwan's future was uncertain, and the U.S.-Taiwan relationship was pretty jolted by the breaking of official relations. Here we are, 45 years later. Taiwan is a thriving democracy. It's a key engine of the global economy, and the U.S.-Taiwan relationship has never been in a stronger position than it is today. The United States and Taiwan are deep, close partners. They consult on just about every major issue in the world. The channels of communication that exist are dense and active and energetic. And the relationship between the United States and Taiwan is anchored in strong bipartisan support in both Washington and Taipei. All the while, peace has been preserved in the Taiwan Strait, and the United States has been able to sustain functional relations with Beijing. If anyone would have suggested in early 1979 that this is where we would be in 2024, I think that they would have taken it. I'm quite confident the framers of the Taiwan Relations Act would have done so. So I wanted to begin by just taking a moment to reflect upon the success of the Taiwan Relations Act over the past 45 years. And then the second point is why. Why has it succeeded? One of the reasons, in my view, is it succeeded because of its flexibility. The framers of the Taiwan Relations Act wisely recognized that the role of the United States is not to serve as a mediator. It is not to resolve disputes on both sides of the Taiwan Strait. Neither side of the Taiwan Strait, frankly, would welcome the United States to play that role even if we sought to. The Taiwan Relations Act, part of its genius is that it has allowed so much flexibility for the United States to adapt to ebbs and flows in the cross-strait relationship over the past 4 decades, all while remaining grounded and anchored in our fundamental interests, one of which is ensuring peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. And the second is insisting that any resolution of cross-strait differences be done peacefully and in a manner that respects the will of the Taiwan people. The Taiwan Relations Act also has preserved decision space for American policymakers to respond to shifting dynamics, while at the same time keeping them firmly anchored around these objectives. The third thought that I would put on the table for our discussion is that the Taiwan Relations Act is not going away, whether we like it or not. I anticipate that we will be coming back in 5 years, celebrate the 50th anniversary of this, and if I'm still around, which I hope, the 75th anniversary as well. There may be some conversations in parts of Capitol Hill about finding ways to improve upon the Taiwan Relations Act. But I frankly will be skeptical until proven otherwise that this will be the case. And part of the reason for this is that it's embedded in 6 assurances that the United States has provided to Taiwan, one of which is that the United States will not revise the Taiwan Relations Act. Another reason is that the Taiwan Relations Act, frankly, has not provided an obstacle to any administration over the past 45 years from pursuing the policies that they have sought to pursue service of our objectives. The fourth and final thought that I will offer for our conversation is that steadiness on the part of the United States will support Taiwan's objective of trying to crowd in global support for upholding peace and security in the Taiwan Strait. President Tsai deserves credit for making historic progress in bringing other countries along and investing them in the mission of upholding peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. I expect that President-elect Lai will build upon the inheritance that President Tsai is leaving and continue to involve and invest other countries around the world supporting Taiwan and cross-strait stability. And the more that the United States is seen as steady and principled behind these objectives, the more progress will be possible because the lower the cost and risk to entry will be for other countries. So I will just stop there and save the rest for our discussion, but I just want to applaud the architects of the Taiwan Relations Act. We are the beneficiaries of their foresight. I expect that we will continue brick by brick to build upon the foundation that they laid for us 45 years ago. And in that process, I am deeply confident in America's ability to continue deepening our relations with Taiwan, protecting the peace, and supporting Taiwan's autonomy, its political system, and its way of life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. You bring up an excellent point about the elasticity of our Relations Act. I think one of the issues that we will likely get into in the question moderate discussion is whether or not that elasticity has been stretched to its limits, right, at this point, given just the circumstances of the PRC's increasing aggressiveness and belligerence. Next, I want to turn it over to Dave Stillwell. Dave, over to you, sir.
Hey, I appreciate the chance to engage. Great to see Josh and Ryan again. You know, Ryan and I we're oftentimes on opposite sides of many issues, but what I really like is that we always have respectful, empathetic, and productive civil discourse, which has been lacking in our country for a while, in part due to what the PRC has been doing and using information warfare with TikTok and the rest. But Ryan, good to see you again, and thank you for always making the time to talk. This is a great conversation. I am going to add very little to it, except that my kids call me the bad idea generator, big. And it's because I'm not very deep in any particular subject. So I'm going to show you a model that Otto von Bismarck from Germany proposed as far as picking the ideal senior leader. And the two axes are brilliant and stupid and industrious and lazy. I can claim lazy most of the time. Brilliance is questionable. But when you look at that matrix, you ask, who's the ideal senior leader? And most people would say brilliant and industrious. Bismarck disagrees. He says brilliant and lazy is the number one, because brilliant and lazy doesn't get bogged down in the details that the brilliant industrious do. The brilliant and lazy tend to sit back and just sort of watch without understanding all the reasons why we do things and excuses why we didn't, how we talked ourselves out of things. And so that's what I hope to bring today, is more of a fresh look from someone who's not that well and not as much as you are imbued in all the details of the Taiwan Relations Act. Oh, by the way, number 3 in that is lazy and stupid, because these guys are too dumb to get out of the way of the bullets in war. So they come home with a chest full of ribbons, and he says he looked great at the head of a parade. This is a useful person to have around. Number 4 is stupid and industrious, because these guys create piles of paperwork that takes you forever to dig through. And his recommendation there is, when you identify this officer, take them out and shoot them. Right. With that entry, I want to divide mine into 3 points. The first, words matter. The second, let's identify the assumptions and the basis for this agreement. And the third is to just point out some responses that, again, I hope we can debate, because they may not be as informed as what my esteemed experts understand. First off, we just heard from Representative Gallagher. If you've read his No Substitute for Victory essay in Foreign Affairs, it's magnificent. That one's going to be bouncing around the halls of the Beltway for a while. And then just checking the news just before this thing, Xi Jinping meeting with Ma Ying-jeou just called it a family reunion. This Tongbao idea, right? We are all one China. Probably the biggest thing I'm going to address here is the idea about one China and whether that's changed. But number 1, words matter. First off, define war. Like, whenever we talk about this, we talk about there's going to be war. You know, my understanding is there is war. The PRC is conducting active warfare in Taiwan. It's conducting active warfare in the United States. It's just economic information in others. It's not kinetic exchanges or armed conflict. So when we talk about war, I think we should be more specific, because the PRC takes a much broader view of what war means, and we need to understand that. Second, on words matter, is that the TRA is not a bilateral agreement, but words do matter. And like Ryan says, I do think the consistency that we've maintained over the years has been important. But going back to my lazy nature, I don't want to be bound by that. I want to take a hard look at it and see if that consistency may be doing damage to both Taiwan and to us and to the region, possibly the world. The formula I use for that is words, white papers, bilateral agreements, words times deeds, your actual actions, equals credibility. If we look at the PRC's number 1 weakness, the best way to attack what they're doing to moderate their behavior, in my mind, it's the legitimacy of the Chinese Communist Party. And so by showing the disconnect between their words and their deeds, 1,000 words, 0 deeds, word 10,000 times 0 is 0, I think we can use that to moderate the behavior in the Taiwan Strait. Secondly, when we talk about this topic overall, and we focus on armed conflict, we artificially bind ourselves to a narrow geopolitical space and a domain. We're not talking information economic, we're talking specifically armed conflict, kinetic exchanges. Well, I would like this conversation to perhaps expand. And as we look at a revised TRA or an addendum to the TRA, I would look at perhaps expanding it from just that very narrow Taiwan Strait, East China Sea, to looking at areas geopolitically where the PRC is weaker. And then you turn this into one of the top words, very important word in the conversation here today, is deterrence. We don't want to deal with the after effects of an unfortunate act by the PRC. We want to deter, unlike we did with Ukraine and even Russia. Let's think of how we can deter. And I think we can deter by not binding ourselves in the realm of military activity in the Taiwan Strait. Again, these are all in some ways reflected in the TRA. And look, I'll just cut to the chase. My suggestion is we do with the Taiwan Relations Act what we did with the Hong Kong Policy Act. And then, if you remember, we expanded that, Congress did in 2019, to the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, which gave the government additional authorities and was a very clear message, back to words, a message to Beijing that should you take this course of action, the penalties will be severe. Penalties could have been more severe. We can talk about that on a different day, but I think we should look at that for an example. I was initially going to propose we just, scrap the TRA and build something new that reflects the new conditions, as Xi Jinping would say, of the relationship. Again, I think everybody agrees that would be a bad idea. I don't think updating it would be out of line. No, in fact, I'm going to advocate for that. So let's look at the assumptions for this. We mentioned Hong Kong. Again, I'm taking the lazy view of not understanding all the details, but to me, the basis of the bilateral US-China relationship is this idea of one China. And in my mind, that is predicated on the idea of one country, two systems. And whether or not that's true, I do believe we can use that in terms of messaging our concern to Beijing and our potential actions by pointing out that you, in 2020, with the takeover of Hong Kong, walked away from your commitment to one country, two systems, which also affects Taiwan, which makes the whole agreement on one China moot. It's no longer viable. So if we're going to modify this, we have to show to what degree the PRC changes are driving us to update our policy. In addition, we should also look at great allies in Japan, increasingly in the Philippines, maybe ROK and others, ASEAN, in joining in chorus in multiple voices to express to the PRC that the assumption being this is purely a issue between Beijing and Washington, D.C., to show Beijing it's not, right? In terms of deterrence, there are multiple actors who disagree with their current course of action and the disruption, economic and otherwise, this is going to cause should they take an unfortunate step. Finally, on responses, I kind of mentioned earlier, is we need to really expand our thinking, and this is something I hope we can talk about, is expand our geopolitical perspective. I want to look at Western China where they're weak. I want to be able to increase information penetration into the PRC as part of our message that we care enough about Taiwan that we're willing to take these steps to deter you from going further and let the concerns about Taiwan be resolved as agreed with dialogue and without coercion and use of force. They seem to have forgotten that. I think we should remind them of that agreement. Public coordination on these things, not private. Public coordination, I think, is useful. Using public diplomacy and letting the PRC know that this is going to happen in a deterrence framework. And then finally, I pointed out the book, Information Warfare. I was in Taiwan in April or August of last year. And, Taiwan allows PRC television to show, and they were showing CCTV. And the message from CCTV was that Taiwan, the U.S. is going to undercut you. They're selling you aircraft that are far lack, the J-20 capabilities, and they're abusing the authority, your relationship. Again, this is information warfare, and we should find a way to. I'd rather see CCTV 1. You watch, Ryan and I are on the treadmill at the embassy in Beijing, watching CCTV 1 reviews of what Xi Jinping ate for breakfast. That would probably help the Taiwan people understand that, yeah, it's not quite the big fuzzy panda that they think it might be. And then to conclude, and this is my pet rock while I'm here at the Air Force Academy, critical thinking. All of these things would benefit from us taking a more methodical approach to how we attack hard questions like this. While in Taiwan, we met with Iris Wong from the, forgetting the name of the university down south near Kaohsiung, but she gave us a great presentation on how Taiwan teaches critical thinking in its schools, K through 12 and elsewhere. And so we learned a lot from that, and we are incorporating that into what we're doing here to increase the level of critical thinking at the Air Force Academy. I'll stop with that. Hopefully it created some controversy. What I do best.
Well, thank you very much for that, David. I think you certainly achieved that goal in raising a great deal, laying a lot on the table for us to be able to discuss in the discussion component part of our panel discussion. I take your point, especially with regards to how the PRC's behavior is driving a lot of these changes and in part necessitating the conversation that we are having here right now And that, I think, is a point that is widely shared and understood. And all your, I think critical recommendations are key to figuring out what the appropriate next steps ought to be in order to ensure, the long-term peace and security of the Taiwan Strait and broader region. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Josh. Yes.
Thanks for that, Russell. It's great to be here. Thanks for making me part of this event. It's an honor to be here with Ryan and Still. Ryan, I've been tossing the ball around on this for almost 2 decades, probably. And great to hear from our young congressman as well. We really made me feel like a senior representative here. The Taiwan Relations Act is indeed a remarkable document worth celebrating. It's a convergence of American principles, strategic interests, and the machinery of the US government doing pretty much what it was designed to do. One can hope we see it as a milestone en route to future triumphs of judgment, rather than an artifact of a more sober, deliberate, and civil era of American politics. I read the Global Taiwan brief on this subject. I read the pieces closely. Congratulations, it was comprehensive. I will try to ensure my remarks don't repeat anything said more eloquently in that brief. I'm going to make 3 main points. But before I do, I just want to extract what I think were the 2 main questions that the GTI brief excavated. One, has the US government complied with the requirements spelled out in the TRA? Easy one, the answer is no. Conclusion drawn by most of the contributors in the brief, with failures of compliance mostly related to its defense-related provisions. And then 2, is the TRA fit for purpose with contemporary realities, given changes not just to the strategic balance of influence in the Western Pacific, but also to changes in the domestic political dynamics on both sides of the strait? It's an understandable impulse that the first answer also answers the second. But spoiler alert, my instinct on this is qualified not so fast or be careful what you wish for. 2 points on the TRA. The GTA brief rightly identifies the TRA as a foundation or floor upon which the United States conducts relations with Taiwan. It asserts an affirmative policy for the executive branch to follow, delineates expectations of how the executive branch should pursue it, and then devotes a great deal of text to the creation of mechanisms to enable that pursuit, and then to ensure everything in the TRA is compatible with US law. As I read the document, and maybe I'm missing something, I don't see anything that resembles a negative constraint or prohibition, a ceiling on what we can do in Taiwan upon the foundation that the TRA has laid. The idea of constraint does suffuse the TRA, does suffuse the document, but it's not a constraint on our relations with Taiwan. It's a constraint on the degree to which the US executive branch engagement with China, or the China mainland as it's referred to in the TRA, might impede US pursuit of broader interests, security, commercial, and other that might implicate Taiwan. Summing up, as a set of parameters for governing US relations with Taiwan, the TRA, in my view, is capacious to the point of being more or less open-ended. The United States can do a lot more on the basis of this document, and we should do more. I mentioned up top that the TRA was a product of, let's just call it a different era of US politics. As some of the GTA brief authors noted, in part, the TRA was a conscious reassertion of legislative branch oversight authority, rising out of a sense that the executive branch had reached and executed a series of strategically momentous decisions without sufficient oversight. And maybe not just without sufficient oversight, but also without the comprehensive deliberation or foresight that should be required of strategically momentous decisions. Concerns, not just limited to Congress, about the strategic aptitude of the Carter administration are well documented, and this was certainly part of the political context of the TRA. Congress simply did not have the confidence that the Carter administration had the knowledge, information, or orientation that would make it a reliable steward of US strategic interests. But as I read the TRA, I imagine that the same implicit critique offered the Carter administration after the January 1, 1979 communique was in part also directed at the process that surrounded the Nixon administration's negotiation and declaration of the Shanghai Communique in 1972. In other words, the TRA is offered as a hedge on executive branch policy incompetence, but also a hedge on executive branch overconfidence, past and future. And the importance of this hedge became even more glaring with the issuance of the 1982 joint US-China communique, which presents an outstanding example of both executive branch incompetence and overconfidence, and which was such a shambles that the president who authorized it had basically to issue a secret clarification and more or less repudiation. The TRA is a tight document, declarative, directional, and restrained in the way it stays in the legislative branch lane on foreign policy. Rather than attempting to envision a future with certainty, it creates maneuver space to hedge against future uncertainty. The TRA is not a policy document corrupted by missionary zeal. Another thing the TRA is not is a political performance piece. It is not a messaging strategy, so loved by many policymakers of our time. It was not, to my knowledge, enacted in order to get anybody in Congress elected to higher office. So as people deliberate upon whether the TRA needs to be updated or replaced, it is worth asking the sober question of whether the US political system and process, as we see it trundling crunchily along today, is capable of producing a policy document that does such an excellent job and restrained job, distilling US interests and principles for use in a dynamic foreign policy apparatus prone to amateurishness and overenthusiasm. I'm sure we would all like to be able to say yes. I would like to be able to say yes, but the 5 o'clock news keeps telling me to hold my beer. Third point. I've referred to the TRA's reflection of US interests and principles or values, and I want to qualify that. The TRA leads with interests, vice values. It focuses on interests, and it never bangs the drum or beats the reader over the head on values. One word that does not appear in the TRA, at least as far as my Microsoft word search, is the word democracy. Respect for preservation and advancement of human rights for the people of Taiwan is mentioned, but no democracy for the simple reason that democratic governance was not in place on either side of the Taiwan Strait. The TRA was enacted. US values are nonetheless expressed in meaningful ways in the TRA. The virtues of robust commercial and cultural exchange, the rights of people, irrespective of the diplomatic status of their government, to live in peace and security, free of threat and coercion, and the right to fair protection under US law. Overall, one way to interpret the US values component of the TRA is as an attempt to support the dignity as global citizens of the people of Taiwan, despite the indignity the Taiwanese suffered in seeing their longtime ally and friend withdraw diplomatic recognition. Withdrawing diplomatic recognition for a government, by the way, that had existed for 67 years at the time diplomatic recognition was withdrawn, making it older and better established than the majority of countries in the world would continue to enjoy official recognition. I will close by conveying my view that US policymakers at the time underestimated or maybe disregarded the trauma to Taiwan, to the Taiwan people, of its loss of US diplomatic recognition. But what Taiwan's people have accomplished in the wake of that trauma has outperformed the expectations of what any outside observers could have imagined. That's not merely a reference to the establishment of democracy, enviable political pluralism, a vibrant civil political life, or to Taiwan's emergence as a trade, investment, and technological global powerhouse. One wishes, by the way, that peoples anywhere in the world who aspire to recover or gain formal recognition nationhood would respond to its absence the way that Taiwan has done, not through militancy, terrorism, and dependency, but through economic vitality and self-improvement. Taiwan, for anyone who has been there, is a society that works and within which people are able to live in dignity. So it is understandable and confusing that a dignified people who achieve so much have to live in a world of nation states in which they are accorded less than full respect, and in which one major actor in that world of nation states is pursuing a unification strategy predicated in part upon diminishment of Taiwan's achievements and elimination of the Taiwan people's rights to live in dignity. Among other things, that governance policy comes from a place of deep cynicism about politics and human aspiration. For reasons of both interests and principles, the United States has a duty to resist it. So as we in the United States think about how we pursue relations with Taiwan over the next 45 years or 50, let's start by thinking about how we can engender respect for the Taiwan people's dignity, rights to live in dignity. Maybe on the road to that goal, we might behave in a more dignified way ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josh, for that very artful exposition of the shortcomings of the limitations of the Taiwan Relations Act, and also keeping us reminded that really the congressional intent of the TRA is really the people of Taiwan, and that reminds me of a quote that Late Congressman Lester Holt had written in his book called "The Legislative Intent of the Taiwan Relations Act." Lemon Wrap and Enigma. Just quote here before turning it over to panel to give them a chance to respond to each other's comments if they want to build on or rebut or just or just comment on that, and then lead into the moderated discussion. And Company Wolf's comment here is: countless times over the years, the TRA has been called upon to render judgment over changing circumstances or events. It's met those demands to survive without serious amendment because of the ambiguity built in that provided for adaptation to current conditions. It was conceived as a device to enhance peace in the region and protect the political integrity of people's right to choose. Those people are the people of Taiwan. And so with that, I just want to quickly remind our online viewers that we also want to hear from you. So please, if you have any questions, please send them over to contact@globaltaiwan.org, or use the chat function on the YouTube page. A reminder to please include your name as well as your affiliation with that question, and address that to a particular speaker if you could. Those questions that do include names and affiliations will be prioritized. So first, I have several questions that I want to ask the entire panel. But first, I'm going to give a chance quickly whether or not you had any sort of comments or responses that you wanted to react to from each other's opening statements. Dave, do you have any further sort of thoughts or provocations that you want to raise for our considerations?
I thought both inputs were great, thought-provoking. On Josh, I agree. I mean, look, this is a notional debate. There's nothing going to happen for this. But yeah, your point that the TRA exists surely purely for the fact that it moderates and puts a floor on U.S. government behavior, I agree with. But I also think in an information warfare climate, we do have to consider what the impacts would be on Beijing, and do they deter action? And so while leaving it intact is a perfectly acceptable course of action, I think we should consider what deterrent message we can send by updating it as well. Just a thought.
Excellent. And I think that leads very well to the question that I want to lead off with for our moderated discussion portion of the event. And this goes on that, the importance of deterrence. And I think the overarching sort of question is whether or not, deterrence is failing. And so in the face of the PRC's destabilizing efforts to change the status quo in the Taiwan Strait, should the United States change how it operates, supports, and engages with Taiwan? And then more specifically, could this be done without declaring a change in U.S. policy towards Taiwan or revising the TRA? Or, should the United States embrace higher profile approaches to increasing support for Taiwan by publicly and explicitly clarifying U.S. commitments to Taiwan? What, in your view, are the merits and risks of those different approaches? And where, and if you'd like to take a position on it, where do you stand on that issue of either, clarification or Anyone here?
I can get us started still, providing a picture for you to shoot at. My general sense is that the more pressure, visible public pressure, the people, or the leadership in China puts on Taiwan, the more incumbent it is upon the United States to provide offsetting support that is visible and tangible to the people of Taiwan. But in doing so, I think that there is a virtue in following the Hippocratic Oath of doing no harm. I think it's incumbent upon leaders in the United States to understand what it is that the people of Taiwan most want and believe that they most need. That's what partners do. That's what friends do in times of trouble and need. And when I listen to my friends in Taiwan, I'll tell you what I hear, and I welcome others to correct our challenges. But I hear that the people of Taiwan want to live with dignity and respect. And Josh, I think, was very eloquent addressing this. They would like to have a vibrant economy. They want to be able to protect the health of their people. And it's important for them to be able to protect their own security and for the United States to provide support for them to do so. That is the starting point, I think, of where we should and how we should engage with our Taiwan friends to show them support in the face of the rising pressure that they feel from people on the opposite side of the strait.
I'll respond in part to Stillie's comment as well. I agree with Brian. Every reaction should have an equal or stronger reaction should have an equal or even stronger reaction from the U.S. I don't know that and in answer to your question, is deterrence failing? It is failing. It hasn't failed, but it's failing. So we need to strengthen that.
Is that a failure of the implementation of TRA, or is the TRA itself inadequate to address?
Well, I disagree. I think the TRA is adequate, but I think Stillie made a couple of interesting and provocative suggestions here. One is that how we respond to Taiwan action or China actions in the Taiwan and around the Taiwan Strait doesn't necessarily have to be limited to reaction related exactly to Taiwan. There are all kinds of ways of responding within the confines of US-China relations. And I think probably what we need to do, one of the pieces in the GTA, the brief, talked about a policy review. That we should have sort of, as we do for all crisis planning, a series of developments and scenario plans that involve tripwires and responses, right? We do need to think deeply about all the ways we can exact a cost on China for doing things that we find weaken the stability of the Taiwan Strait. It can happen in all kinds of dimensions: economic dimension, informational dimension, and we should actually start to put a playbook together. But it doesn't need to be limited to, our response doesn't need to be limited to the Taiwan Strait.
Dave, if I could bring you into this conversation quickly, because while you were the Assistant Secretary of State, the former administration had declassified a series of the 6 assurances, as well as a series of these internal memos that we now publicly reference. And at least in terms of the public discourse on policy, U.S. policy towards Taiwan, I personally found as a researcher to be very immensely helpful to be able to sort of clarify some of the underlying intent of U.S. policy towards Taiwan that is oftentimes very mired in complexity and sometimes seemingly contradictions. Could you, perhaps expound on, in your view, what the significance of those actions were and how that, works in the overall policy approaches to Taiwan and cross-strait relations?
That could take a long time. So I'll just try to keep it close. One, Ivan Kanapathy, 6 assurances. That guy worked his butt off to get that done. Let's give credit where credit's due. Props to you, Ivan. We just were the ones who got to release that too. The fact that we did that, I thought, was, again, I go back to messaging, information warfare. Let's Beijing know that we are serious and that we're going to continue. The more, what Josh said, our policy was reciprocity. It's not elegant, it's transactional, it's all those things that diplomats don't like. But if that's where the adversary, the other side, wants to meet you, that's where you have to go. And so that changing our South China Sea policy, match the UNCLOS. These are all things we did proactively, not reactively, proactively to let PRC know that we are not going to allow you to change the status quo without consequence in an effort to deter their actions. And the last thing, and it's been said already, but this unhelpful self-censorship so we don't upset Beijing, you see where that got us. I think there needs to be a whole new calculus on what are the things that the PRC, would physically attack Taiwan for. But I do think that, again, actions in the Trump administration demonstrated that it's going to take a lot more than calling Taiwan a country or, simple things like that before they're going to roll the dice, potentially seeing the end of the CCP. If the attack on Taiwan doesn't work, the CCP is over. And I don't think they're ready to face what Putin's facing in Ukraine. That's his neck at stake. So I guess what I'm saying is risk aversion is killing us. We need to be more bold. We need to be more proactive. And we need to let Beijing know that not today. You could wait another day, another month, another year, or 10 years without the worst happening to you. Right? This is, again, I'm just going to keep saying deterrence. We're not deterring. We need to do a better job.
So sticking on this deterrence topic, then some U.S. scholars now are arguing that in order to effectively deter Beijing, though, and avert war, the United States and Taiwan should be extending credible assurances to Beijing, because assurances is the other prong of deterrence theory, and so you need a mix of credible threats and credible assurances to the PRC. And I think a lot of what we're focusing on in our conversation today, and with regards to the need for more credible threats, is well taken. But what are the panelists' take on this recommendation on the need for extending credible assurances to the PRC? People are claiming, Beijing certainly is thinking, that the United States is hollowing out its one China policy. And do you agree with these descriptions? And do you agree with the recommendation? Why or why not?
I know at least one of the pieces that you're referring to, the scholars recommending signals of reassurance. I think if we agree that our policy toward Taiwan as articulated in the TRA is sufficient right now, and it has maintained the peace and stood the test of time, then I don't think it's a problem to repeat that our policy remains unchanged, right? Now, what we don't need to do, though, is expand on that idea, right? And one of the pieces that I think you're referring to in your question, which I was not a fan of, by the way, neither the timing nor the content, seemed to go beyond the idea of just a recommendation to provide reassurance. It seemed to say that concessions, as I read that article, it seemed to imply that the U.S., beyond a reassurance, might offer something additional in the way of concessions. This is how I read it. And at one point in that article, the authors mentioned that concessions don't need to be two-way. A concession could be unilateral. And I don't think the U.S. needs to be in any position of granting any unilateral concessions on this issue to the PRC. Not to this PRC, not to this PRC government. The answer is, will there ever be a concession in future relations of all these polities? Who knows? The TRA is meant to accommodate that possibility just as much as it accommodates any other possibility. But reassurance is fine, concession is not fine.
Any other further comments, Dave, perhaps, or no? Oh, you want to?
I broadly agree with what Josh just provided. I think our strategy is designed to incentivize the type of behavior that we seek and disincentivize them. And Russell was referring to Thomas Schelling, who happened to win a Nobel Prize in economics for examining this question, that deterrence requires both reassurance as well as threat. And the threat is if you walk closer to me, I'm going to shoot you in the face. The reassurance is if you stop, I will not shoot. If the message that we're conveying is we're going to shoot you in the face no matter what you do, we've sort of eroded our ability to exercise influence over the other side's behavior. Now, we can debate whether or not it is possible to influence the other side's behavior. I continue to believe it is, and that it would be dangerous for us to sort of believe that we have lost any ability to influence outcomes in the Taiwan Strait this room. I think that's a dangerous place for us to be. I would like for us to avoid being there. And so I continue to believe that there is a value for providing both threats as well as reassurance. But as Josh suggested, I don't think that anything that we should offer should go beyond what we have said for the past 45 years. The reassurances that we've provided for the past 45 years, at the limits of our policy and support are more than sufficient, I think, to manage our way through the moment we find ourselves in.
Can I make
Yeah,
one
please.
follow-up? Sorry, just one follow-up to that. That, sort of leveraging Stilly's point, that doesn't mean that we can't think about taking pieces away.
Yeah.
We could easily, referring back to Stilly's point about China's abrogation of the Sino-British Joint Declaration, since China has recognized that one of its treaties broadly in this same subject area they're no longer bound by it. They're basically signaling that other countries that have entered into similar communiques with them could just as well do the same if they find it useful or necessary to do so.
So I know we have probably a lot of questions from the audience. I'm going to ask one more question, and I'm going to open it up for our Q&A from our live audience, as well as in person, as well as online. And this might be somewhat provocative, and I'll, if I'm getting reactions from it, I will pivot to another question, and then open it up for Q&A, because I do have quite a few questions I don't want to ask panelists. But so Ambassador David Sheffer is a professor of practice in the School of Politics and Global Studies and Senior Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, former ambassador for issues at the United Nations. He argued, quote, diplomacy sometimes requires a hard counterpunch. If China invades Taiwan, the United States should recognize the Republic of China, Taiwan, as a sovereign state while maintaining its long-standing recognition of the People's Republic of China and without severing diplomatic relations. The recognition card will be a powerful diplomatic weapon for Washington to deploy in the event Beijing abandons the peaceful means to resolve the governance of Taiwan. Reactions? Okay, yes, please.
I'm going to quote Ryan Hass back at Ryan Hass. I learned a couple things as a diplomat. One, that's a false dichotomy. That's a false choice. Okay, fine. But my favorite one here that applies is never answer hypothetical, especially if you don't have the wherewithal to enforce it. Again, keeping this thing focused on the military realm, it does us a great disservice. We should be thinking about things that Beijing cares about much more. That's domestic stability. You saw what happened with the Urumqi fire and their zero COVID policy. These are things that we can hold at risk that I think will be far more effective than getting bogged down, focused on invasion and blockade scenarios. We have to prepare for those. I completely agree with that. But I do think we have a much better, more credible deterrent message in a bunch of other different ways. And then to the previous conversation, just briefly, in December 2019, David Feith wrote me a fantastic speech that I delivered at CSIS on the 40 years of US-China relationships. All that is to say is all the things we're talking about here, as far as action, reaction, who's at fault for the relationship being the condition is. I think pulling back and doing just a grand survey of where we started in 1979 to where we are today, and then talk about that to show that one side has been just walking right through all agreements, while the other side has been very consistently. And this generates international support. We've seen a lot of help out of Europe and NATO and other allies that we typically don't hear from on this topic. And there's one thing that will deter the PRC better than many or most is international broad resistance to what it's doing. One-on-one bilateral it can deal with. It cannot deal with a bunch of us saying the same thing. Go Lithuania.
All right, wonderful. Okay, so we have about 30 minutes left for audience Q&A. This is more than we usually allot, but given I think the topics at hand and the caliber of our panelists, we'll have some, really outstanding questions from the audience. Please raise your hand and then please state your name as well as affiliation and direct your question. Please. Okay. Please wait for the microphone. Happy to take this.
Yes. Hi, this is Tina Chung with Voice of America's Chinese branch. As we discussed the 45th anniversary of the TRA, we know that China, they do not recognize the existence of the TRA at all. Its effectiveness in the US-China relationship. And also they think it's the US that's upsetting the status quo straight by providing arms to Taiwan. And as we gather here, by President Biden is meeting with a Japanese Prime Minister, having the summit, and former President Ma Ying-jeou is also in Beijing meeting President Xi. So I wonder if you could, just link all these events together and talk about the implication of today's event, and with the, referring to the TRA and its functionality in managing and balancing the relationship. Thank you.
Would any one of the speakers take on the regional security?
Well, it's a pity that our friends in Beijing don't celebrate the Taiwan Relations Act. Because I actually do think that it has a stabilizing effect on cross-strait relations in ways that it would be wonderful for them to recognize. I don't think that the timing of President Biden meeting with Prime Minister Kishida and President Xi meeting with former President Ma Ying-jeou are coincidental. I think that it is probably part of an effort on the part of Beijing to show that they have friends too, that they are not isolated and alone. As the United States demonstrates very tangibly that it's strengthening and deepening its alliance relationships in East Asia. President Ma is an important historical figure who made a contribution to Taiwan. Taiwan is a very robust democracy that can withstand its foreign leaders choosing to meet with whomever they wish. I don't lose a lot of sleep over the fact that President Ma is meeting with President Xi. I also don't spend a ton of time thinking about it because it's notable that we are having their meeting, but I don't think it's going to alter the trajectory of cross-strait relations, US-China relations, China's policy toward Taiwan, or Taiwan's policy toward China.
It's a great question and well articulated. The Taiwan Relations Act, in my view, is about more than Taiwan. We can talk a lot about our affection for Taiwan, Taiwan's development as a democracy, like-mindedness, all of that stuff. But the first sentence in the Taiwan Relations Act situates it very well. To help maintain peace, security, and stability in the Western Pacific. That's what the Taiwan Relations Act is about. So quite apart from our relationship with Taiwan, this is a declaration of US interests in maintaining peace and stability, and I would add a preponderance of US influence in the Western Pacific area. That is the central tension, strategic tension between China and the US. And we right now, and some good friends and foreign officials have done a very good job articulating this and have been roundly criticized for it, but Taiwan and Taiwan's status right now is a strategic issue for the United States. And that's how it's tied together. So when we advance our commitments under the Taiwan Relations Act, we're not just doing so for Taiwan, we're doing it for the United States.
That's it. Yeah.
Michael Pacetic, PBS Online NewsHour. I assume all of you have read the really fabulous piece that Evan Osnes did based on a long, serious reporting trip in Beijing, which evoked, so voce, obviously, these people aren't going to talk for attribution to a Western publication, considerable doubts, both on the economic front and on the international political front, about what Xi's policies have left the country. And one of the major ones is Taiwan. As you've all said, he has stiffened the spine of the United States and all sorts of other allies. From your soundings in Beijing and all your contacts there, have you gotten any indication that they're having second thoughts about what they should be doing about Taiwan?
Yeah. Dave, do you want to take that question?
I'll start. Yeah. The bloom is off the rose. The myth has been busted. I mean, when Ryan and I were in Beijing 12 years ago, it was clear at the time that the economy was not as grand as everybody said it was, that the PRC was inventing the numbers to, again, attract more investment and all those things. Well, it's taken this long for the world to recognize that. And when it's your own pocketbook and the bottom line that's affected, then people are now starting to recognize the falsehood there. So part of that, with Ma Ying-jeou in Beijing, and then I'm looking at Evan Osnos's The Age of Malaise that you mentioned, which is great. To counter to his original book, The Age of Ambition, fantastic. I think that Taiwan people are also seeing the same thing, that this giant benefit of cross-strait relations and trade is overblown, and that it is not the stabilizing factor everyone thought it was. And so my sense, and you guys have spent more time in Taiwan than I have recently, but my sense is that there's this slow recognition that as much as the economic relationship is stabilizing, which I think is what Ma Ying-jeou is in Beijing trying to work out right now, Taiwan has to then expand and diversify its partners, which is why we're seeing another TSMC operation going up and all the rest. Using economics as a strength, as a tool, by simply political commitments and all the rest. So I think part of this change, this sea change we're seeing, is related to the fact that the myth of this ever-expanding Chinese market is going away, and people are doing the right thing finally, and putting their money where it can do better elsewhere.
Yeah.
Mike, thank you for bringing up Evan Osnos' piece. I think that Age of Malaise is the bookend to Age of Ambition is something that we should all read and think about. There's one riddle that I haven't been able to resolve, and it's not usually the job of a panelist to provide things that they don't know, but here I am. I'm going to lose my think tank membership card for this. But on one hand, China's leaders are traveling the world encouraging foreign investment in the United States, which is into China, which is an implicit acknowledgement that China still relies on foreign capital, foreign technology, and foreign know-how to continue to spur its growth. At the same time, China's security services are making it onerously difficult for multinational companies to operate inside China. They're kicking down doors, raiding offices, doing things that are extra lethal without providing very much of an explanation for why they're doing so. And so the top leader is meeting with foreign CEOs. Meanwhile, his security service is shaking down foreign businesses and foreign companies. Those two things run opposite of each other. They are intentional to each other. And I still can't figure out, I don't understand why there hasn't been more of an effort, if the top leader is so determined to encourage and invite foreign investment, foreign technology, foreign know-how. Why these two things remain in such tension?
Right. More questions, please.
Thank you for the terrific discussion. My name is Ken Scatter from Marubeni Corporation, a Japanese private company. So I think today's discussion made us recognize the strategic importance of TRA. And so given this importance and also the Chinese aggression in the decades, and also the Japanese, I think that Japan is the country which is most relevant to Taiwanese issue just next to the US. So do you think Japan also have a similar legal documents like a TRA, and I think it might be too provocative. But do you think like a recent development, including the three national strategic document, or just increasing the defense budget is enough to deter China from invading the US from the US point of view?
US-Japan relations and its role. I mean, you're kind of reframing that a little bit. US-Japan relation and its role in Taiwan security. And are there severe limits to that currently, and where do you see that going?
Can I just tie it up real quick?
Yes, please do.
Maybe like frame it. I was in Misawa, Japan as the commander in 2009 when, for the first time ever, the LDP was voted out and DPJ came in. And DPJ's approach was Asia for Asians, let's build a better relationship with Beijing, right? And that lasted for 1 year until September 2010 over a simple disagreement over, the contiguous waters of the Senkakus. Now we're getting to Taiwan here. The PRC overreacted and started a massive economic war over a simple, territorial disagreement, which brought in Abe, which got Japan moving in this right direction, in a much better direction, and that continues today. And so back to reassuring Beijing, Beijing is doing this to itself. We don't have to reassure them of anything, but we do need to highlight that using, information tools is to explain to Chinese people in the world that Beijing's aggressive behavior is bringing upon itself all of these problems. Does Japan need a TRA? I don't know. One point that Josh made that I think we should not underestimate is it has a moderating effect on not just the U.S., but a moderating effect on Beijing as well, right? Because it basically says we won't go, Josh, you said there's no ceiling, it's a floor, but it also does present a credible statement from the U.S., which we do still have credibility, that we aren't going to go in a certain direction, making, assuring Beijing that whatever happens in Taipei isn't going to be extreme. I think that's important. But as far as a document out of Tokyo would be helpful in assuring the rest of the world and assuring Taiwan and messaging Beijing that they really don't want to go down that path.
Yeah, just to extend the idea a bit, Japan has come along quite a bit in terms of how it, the statements it makes publicly on Taiwan's importance. And what I said about Taiwan being a strategic, the status of Taiwan being a strategic concern for the U.S., it's also more so a strategic concern for Japan. Indeed, the status of Taiwan and peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait is actually a strategic interest of everybody in the world, given that conflict there would grind the global economy, likely grind the global economy to a halt. But given that it is a concern of everybody, that idea of sort of scenario planning and pre-planning responses to objectionable PRC escalations that needn't be done in silos in Washington, in Tokyo, and in other places, that can be planned as a coalition. And it should be strategized together among like-minded partners and allies.
Great. Any more questions from the audience?
Hi, thank you, GTI, for hosting this very important event today, and panelists for the conversation. My name is Andy Shao, and I'm the new executive director for the Formosan Association for Public Affairs, also known as SCAPA. And my question is this. The last Taiwan policy review was conducted in 1994 by the Clinton administration. And among other effects, we know that policy review normalized something such as the high level officials transiting through the US. And it's been 30 years since that last policy review. During that time, as you all have mentioned, and we all know, Taiwan has become a vibrant democracy from a very nascent one. So while revising the TRA may be difficult, how would you assess a second Taiwan policy review? And will that increase deterrence across the Taiwan Strait? And this question is for any of you. Thank you so much.
Josh?
Yeah, I would want to know first who's doing the review. This goes along with what I said at the outset, be careful what you wish for. Right? does our political conditions, people who would be conducting the review today, are they driven with the same level of restraint and foresight and so forth? It could be a good idea, it could be a horrible.
I will just add to what Josh said. The last time we conducted this review, I think everyone who participated in it, everyone who cared deeply about Taiwan, felt angry at the end of it. And so if I had a magic wand or if I was king for the day, I would spend less time thinking about a strategic review, more time encouraging Congress to fund Ukraine. We know from Taiwan's own leaders how much support for Ukraine matters as a measure of the stability, the reliability, the predictability of the United States and its commitments and support. And every day that passes, every day that the situation in Ukraine erodes is a day that makes life easier for propagandists in Beijing. It provides them more space, more opportunity to paint the United States as unreliable, undependable, and to call into question whether or not people in Taiwan, people in the Philippines, people in Japan, people elsewhere should place their eggs in the American basket. This is a real-time urgent issue that is happening as we speak. And to me, if I was going to put things in priority order, that's where I would like to start.
I think the only point that I would add to that is that, not speaking directly to whether a review is necessary at this point, I would, in my personal view, I think the conditions under which a potential review could take place is better now than it was 30 years ago. I think there is a broader legislative foundation for affirming the foundation of U.S. policy towards Taiwan as a result of, passage of Taiwan Travel Act or, the Age of Reassurance Initiative Act, and a number of numerous provisions provided in a series of national defense organization acts that do, I think, provide some guardrails there in how a potential review, could take place that would establish, better and firmer parameters than previously had existed in the last 30 years ago. So, any more questions from our audience members? We do. Yes, okay.
David Tsai from GDI. Thank you very much for this. This is really, really remarkable. And I second the categories. Since that the TRA is a remarkable document. However, it took the State Department 2 years before the discussion and before the draft was presented to the conference. And it was grossly missing 2 elements. One is US strategic interest. 2 is Taiwan's human rights. And you all talk about the strategic interest. Now I am going to concentrate on the human rights. I have a question. In the testimony in the Congress, all of the Taiwanese stressed the importance of human rights. What's the right? Professor Peng, Dr. Chen Nangshan, who later became Taiwan's foreign minister, and scholars, Paris Zhang, and all of them, Amnesty International, they all emphasize the importance of human rights of the Taiwanese. Here I wanted to quote the testimony 45 years ago from Tang Hassan, who was in the US, but not allowed to return to Taiwan. Later on, he became the foreign minister. He said that we would like to be independent, to have our own government, to establish a free democratic republic of Taiwan, not Republic of China, Republic of Taiwan. I understand that the US administration, several administrations discouraged Taiwan from pursuing establishment of or the process of establishing the Republic of Taiwan. What do you suggest that the future administration not to discourage Taiwan to do that?
question is, should the U.S. discourage?
I mean, well, I think Dr. Tsai, you know as well as I do my views on this, but as far as what U.S. policy is concerned, I think there's a clarifying point that is perhaps missing in a lot of public understanding with regards to U.S. policy on, Taiwan independence, right? I think the president has stated a number of times now that the United States does not encourage Taiwan independence, but he has also simultaneously has said that it is independent, it makes its own decisions. I think it's a very important, distinguishing point here that I think the United States affirms Taiwan's agency to make its own decision without having to take a position on whether on this issue of sovereignty of Taiwan. And that is sort of the delicate balance that has to be dealt with regards to the future of Taiwan's status. I understand that's probably not a satisfying answer to your sort of question with regards to U.S. position on this question, but it is, as I think all the panelists have explained and well understood, Taiwan policy does not exist within a vacuum, and that there are other constraints as well. But I think that point about affirming Taiwan's agency to make its own decision has been an important and necessary clarification that was made, under this current administration. In fact, President Biden has stated himself with regards to that, and while also restating that the United States does not take a position on the sovereignty of Taiwan. I don't know if anyone else has.
Since we're out of time, I just want to offer one passionate pushback to something that Stilly said. Stilly, I will never accuse you of being lazy or anything other than smart.
Look, we have 6 minutes left, but I do want to ask one last question. So this is a question that I had prepared for our panelists. And this builds off the question of one of the Congressman Gallagher's opening statement in this regards to the now 4 statements that President Biden has stated with regards to the United States, that the United States will come to the defense of Taiwan in the event of a PRC military invasion. And of course, his administration's officials, including himself, have also stated that there has been no change in policy. So, in your view, then, did the president's statement indicate a change in policy, and what are, the significance of these statements made by the president with regards to the broader policy framework towards Taiwan? Oh, all right, great, thanks.
I'll just say he just used his inside voice outside. He just said what we're all thinking. I have a lot of time at Indo-PACOM and in the military, and there are aspects of that activity that back up what the president said. Look, it takes us down the path of strategic clarity and ambiguity. I'm a big fan of strategic ambiguity. One, Jinmen. I mean, what do you do about that? The lessons we learned from Dean Acheson in 1950, you draw that line in the wrong spot, man. That takes you down to the second question. What does Taiwan think about that? And one of the things we were guilty of in the Pentagon, for sure, was not taking into account the Taiwan vote enough as a true partner. Oftentimes just launching off in one direction, and then after, as an afterthought, going back, oh, is that okay with you guys? So we need to increase the coordination with Taiwan. Beijing's not going to like that, but it actually is in their favor, because what we do will be more deliberate and the rest. So what the president said, I think, is what everybody's been thinking all along. He just said it. And as much as I don't like walkbacks, I think the walkback provided sufficient ambiguity to prevent the PRC from doing what it always does, is when you draw a red line, they're going to put a toe across it. And if you do not respond correctly, you just incentivize them to do more. So again, a big fan of ambiguity.
Great. Any comments? I do have one more question. I don't want to get to that one because we do have 4 minutes left, and I want to maximize our time with you guys.
I'll just add to what Stilly was saying a moment ago, which is my experience around American presidents. When they say something 4 times, they typically mean it. And the fact that he has made this point 4 times in public suggests that it is a reflection of his conviction. That said, President Biden is rarely accused of rhetorical precision. And so I think that there is a fuzziness to the manner by which he has said, even if the underlying sentiment is very clear. I thought that the handling of his comments by his staff was a bit clumsy. I think that when the president speaks, let the president's words speak for themselves. But underneath this, President Biden's comments reflect sort of a through line of American policy dating back to World War II. We constantly are adapting and evolving our approach to meet the most proximate threat that we see to peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. That is the North Star of our policy. When we are concerned about actions in Taiwan, as we were in the China administration, the United States was rather forceful and direct in expressing those concerns. When we are concerned about Chinese aggression against Taiwan, President Biden is very clear and direct in expressing those concerns as well. They're all guided by the same goal, which is constant, which is preserving peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait.
So the last question will go to Shirley Kahn, who is an advisor on GTI's advisory board. And even though she's not here with us, actually a lot of her thinking has actually permeated through our conversation in the article, and many articles she has written for GTI. And our question is for all three speakers. William Lai will be inaugurated as the ROC Taiwan president on May 20th. What should be his priorities in increasing deterrence and diplomacy to keep peace and stability?
Yeah, I'm not going to offer any advice on the platform. That's Taiwan administrations have the wisdom to know what to do on that. I would say it's important for Taiwan to be on the right side of things. And over the Tsai administration, despite the provocations, despite the constrictions, despite the indignities, President Tsai has managed to maintain composure, maintain balance, and to work within the constraints that are presented. And I think as President-elect, sustains that sort of approach and that wisdom, I'm on the right side.
All right. With that, please join me in thanking our wonderful panelists for taking all the questions and for their excellent commentaries and observations on US-Taiwan relations. A final plug for our task force report that GTI published, chaired by the former National Security Advisor, Ambassador Robert O'Brien, advancing the US-Taiwan partnership in a changing global landscape. I think a lot of recommendations provided in this task force report also goes to, how many senior U.S. practitioners of policy towards Taiwan think about the future of Taiwan. And I think this is a very good time to review some of the content and recommendations of this report, which is available on our website, free for download. So thank you all again, and thanks to our panelists for being here, and all of you. This event will be posted online, so you may view both the congressman's keynote remarks as well as all the discussions here on our website at www.globaltaiwan.org. Thank you.